Hey all! I was planning to do a compressor shootout video today, but I got some really interesting questions from a person named Ben. Ben asked these questions inside the Facebook group, the Line 6 Pod Go -free patches group. I think that's the name of my group, is it? Anyway, I'll link it somewhere down below so you can visit it if you still have Facebook. I'm not even sure that I'm gonna play the guitar in this video, but maybe, I think I will. So anyway, back to the interesting questions that Mr. Ben asked. When and where to use compression? How does compression color the sound? And the third question is, what settings for what genre? And we also got a bonus question from Paul, which is a great one. What's the worst thing you can do with a compressor to wreck your tone? So I'm gonna try to answer these. So when and where to use compression? Well, what better place than here, and what better time than now? Why do you want compression? I don't know. Honestly, I think the best way to approach this question is to tell you why I'm using compression, and I'm gonna grab my guitar now. So what's the deal with this guitar? Why I want compression on this guitar, and why I want it with the Pod Go? Well, I hope that you know this, but these things, the pickups, they come in various outputs. They can be low, they can be medium, they can be high, they can be very high, and they can be very low. I think that this guitar in particular has very low output pickups. So these two are single coils and they are noiseless. And this down here is a humbucker, which is on my guitar always split with this button right here. But the official name is Twin Head Vintage Humbucker, I think. And the thing about all three pickups is that they are low in output. So you can imagine that this guitar in particular is not gonna drive the amp like most of the other guitars in the market today. Now, I'm definitely not aware of all the things that are going on in the pickup market today, but honestly, I think I'm in the minority when it comes to pickup output type. These are vintage, so that means low. So to be very specific, I'm using compression to do one thing. I'm compressing my tone before it even hits the pod with a Carl Martin dual compressor / limiter. And for the most time, I'm using only channel 1, where there's a bit more compression and a bit less level going into the pod right from the start. So to demonstrate what kind of an impact does a compressor like this have on my sound, I'm gonna bypass it, play a riff, then I'm gonna engage it, play a riff again, and you can hear the difference for yourself. So when it comes to when and where to apply compression, in my case, in my personal setup, that's as a first thing in the chain and always. Now the reasoning for this can be as deep as we make it at this point. I don't want to talk about sweet spots because they are kind of a rough topic to cover, honestly. However, with that said, in the last 6, 7, 8 years or maybe more, I've used different VST plugins that emulate different kind of analog gear. And one thing that often pops up is the term sweet spot. What that means is that a specific kind of plugins or specific kind of gear likes to receive a specific kind of level. Now the things get even more complicated when I say that things like to receive a specific kind of loudness, which is in my mind an entirely different thing. So level and loudness is just not the same. Yes, we control the loudness with the level control. However, we can affect the loudness with compression in various ways. Now the second question, how does the compressor color the sound? Well, I hope that you had the chance to hear it just now. First of all, you can hear how the dynamics of your sound are getting squashed. And squashed in this case is not necessarily a bad term. One other thing that people often say when they use a compressor is this: it makes your life easier. Now, I'm not sure if that's true, because if you don't practice, you'll suck anyway, but This idea that a compressor makes you work less is kind of true, because when you think about it, if the dynamics are getting squashed, then the difference between the loudest and the softest parts you play will be less significant. So the first and foremost, the compressor will change the feel. And that's the most important thing. It will change the feel. It will change the way you play, the way you attack the strings. It will change the way you hear the strings. It will change the way the low string sound versus how the high string sounds. Everything will be a bit more even, and that's mostly a good thing. For this third question, I have to disappoint Ben, unfortunately, because there are no ideal settings. But I can share a few tips that will maybe help you dial in your own settings. But to say a bit about my favorite settings for guitar compression, I'm gonna grab the bass just for a second. So this is a bass guitar, and I played this one maybe 5 times in a year. When I'm compressing the bass guitar, I have a completely different mindset to when I'm doing the same thing on a guitar. One of the major issues I had when I first started mixing and recording and producing my own music and eventually music for other people is the consistency of the low end. Now this is a big thing in the last 10, 20, maybe even 30 or more years, I don't know. Ever since we got the electronic music, we suddenly realized, hey, we have synthetic kicks, we have synthetic bass lines, and everything can be really loud and really compressed. Now, I don't want to get too much into genre deconstruction and talk too much about differences between EDM and death metal, but there are definitely some similarities. Usually when I'm compressing a bass guitar, I aim for higher ratio settings, so it's either 6:1 or 8:1. We don't have 8:1 inside this deluxe com, but it doesn't matter. What I want from a compressor that's on my bass track is this. I want it to attack fast and I want it to release slow. Now maybe not this fast, maybe something like this. So what will happen? The compressor will react very fast on the notes I play. And the release part of the compressor will keep that bass consistent as I play it. With a compressor we control the dynamics, but you have to be aware that we control those dynamics over time, and that these two very important parameters you can find inside almost every compressor are also expressed in milliseconds or seconds or whatever. In today's music, I think it's not so uncommon to literally sync your compressor to the tempo of your song. So when you're trying to figure out a good relationship between your kick and your bass sound, you'll probably have to figure out what's your quarter note and how is the song pumping. And because that's the thing with compressors, they really can pump. You know how people say they can hear the pump of the compressor. That's exactly what's going on. The attack and release controls are causing the pump. So attack, release, attack, release, attack, release. So however fast you wanna set that is up to you. It will depend on so many things that I absolutely did not cover in this section. So there's one more great question, and that was what's the worst thing you can do with a compressor to wreck your tone? Now obviously over compression is a thing, and you can reach that point where you've set the threshold so low that dynamics are technically non-existent. Now again, this is very context dependent, and this may work in some scenarios, and if it works for you, don't worry and go for it. However, I feel there's one place where compression is almost completely unnecessary, and that's on high gain or very distorted tones. So imagine that you're playing a clean sound and the waveform that's spreading across the room, and its visual representation would look something like this. So you play and there are peaks and valleys. As you pluck the note, it gets higher and then it dies. Pluck it again, pluck it again. So imagine something like a heartbeat with transients. So every time you hit a string, you are creating a transient. And when we talk about transients, they are usually the most loudest points in our guitar signal. With distorted tones, things are a bit different, because distortion is, and it's the topic of the day, compression, the most violent form of compression. So, because when you think of it, overdrives and distortions are just really aggressive compressors. What happens with the transients then is that they literally get eliminated, because There's so much compression going on with the tone that the peaks and valleys will not appear anymore. And everything will, again, this is another really a cool term, look like a sausage. So yeah, that's probably the worst thing that you can do to your tone with a compressor, to compress a tone that's already heavily distorted and driven. Anyway, that's it. This was compression part 2 out of 100. I'll probably do part 3 and then we have another 97 parts to cover in the year 2022. I'll see you all soon. Bye all.